Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pada kesempatan kali ini saya Juan Jan RP 7005 akan belajar tentang desain pengalaman pengguna untuk 1,5 jam ke depan.
In this video, we'll create a complete single-page Bootstrap template called the Nuno theme. How you can add your own background image. Then if we size the website down, we're going to see that the navigation and the content that sits on top of the landing page are going to shift when we drop down to the mobile or tablet version of the website. Then moving down the page, the next section that we'll get to will be the course section, as you can see right here with the navigation link lit up once we scroll into the course section of the website. And this is just a little promotion with a link to my course that I mentioned earlier in the video for Udemy, with on the left, and then the text with the quote on the right, followed by a horizontal rule, and then the site tag or italic text underneath it. So use the Get Started button to go down to the course section, or we can scroll through the page before we get started with the HTML and CSS. So as you can see here with the drop-down navigation, we can scroll to different sections of the page, and then we can just use the Get Started button to go down to the course section, or we can scroll through the page as you can see here to look at the different elements. So it's important to know the fixed image background sections will work on mobile versions, so cell phones, for example, the iPhone, and tablets, using some specific CSS that I've included for you already, because it's kind of difficult to get mobile websites to display fixed background images, and that's going to be included in these starter files that I have linked for you in the video description, which you can go ahead and download right now. And then once you download them, we're going to open up index.html and style.css in our text editor. So I'm going to be using the free program called Sublime Text. Another program that you can use is Visual Studio Code, both of which are top of the line free text editors that work for Mac computers and PCs, which you can download by doing a simple Google search for either one. So I'm also going to have index.html open with Google Chrome as we're building the website. Okay, so we'll go over the starter files in more detail in just a little bit. So if you need to, the starter files which are necessary to take part in, or to partake in the course. And let's move over to Sublime Text to get our first look at index.html and style.css. So the first thing that you'll notice here in index.html, and then once you get to style.css, is that there's a little bit of content already included for us, and the only HTML and CSS content outside of the head section and linking CSS and JavaScript files will be this content that you see right here, which again is a little promo for the course that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and you're welcome to leave the HTML and CSS in there to save some time later in the video, but I will be deleting it so we can learn how to create that section for ourselves. So let's start off from the top of index.html and let's go over what's already included for us here. So from the top of index.html, we'll start off with the head section right underneath our doc type HTML, and then our actual HTML tag where we specify language English. We have, as I said, the head section where all of the invisible important information will be that tells the browser we want the website to display. So at the top of the head section we have our character type, which is the standard UTF-8, and then we have metaname viewport with device with initial scale 1 for mobile devices and tablets, and then we have the title of the website, which if I drop the browser downright section that we see right here, and everything inside of the body section, unless we're linking to files as we are right here, will actually be what displays on the website. So let's take a look at what the files are down here that we're linking to. So the first file will be jQuery and the latest version of it, which is necessary to run the Bootstrap framework. And then underneath that we have our bootstrap min.js folder. So with Bootstrap we'll need to reference the CSS file and the JS file, so bootstrap.min.js. And then underneath that, this is the only thing that we're going to be linking to externally, and the only reason is because the icons plugin that we're using called Font Awesome, which will display these icons that we're seeing right here, as well as the social media icons that you see down here. And you can get your own custom icons from doing a Google search for Font Awesome, but the reason why we're linking to it externally is because they update it so often with new icons. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do away with the HTML and CSS that's already included for us for the course section that you see right here. As I said before, you're welcome to keep it in there to save yourself some time, so you can skip over that section if you want, but I want us to start from scratch here, other than the linking of the files in the head section and the bottom of the body section with the JavaScript files. And one last thing here before we get started. You can see that I've included some information on the Bootstrap breakpoints. So the only breakpoint that we're going to be using in this will be the medium width breakpoint, which occurs at 768 pixels. But you're welcome to experiment with the different breakpoints that you see, and you'll learn more about how to use them in your experiment breakpoints. That you see, and you'll learn more about how to use them in your experimenting as the video goes on. Okay, so let's take a look at the first thing that we're going to add to the website, and that's going to be something called Bootstrap Scroll Spy. So as we noticed while looking through the website, when we scroll to different sections, you'll see that the navigation will be highlighted per section we're scrolling through. So to do that, what we'll need to do is first tell the body that we're going to be using something called data spy scroll for Bootstrap Scroll Spy, as I said. And then the next thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to link to the ID that will give the navigation. So we're going to say data target, and then the ID that we're going to give the navigation with the hashtag there that you can see for the ID is navbar responsive with a capital R in responsive. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll need to identify an ID for each section that we're scrolling through. So the home section ID will end at the bottom of the landing page image, for example. As you can see, once we get past that point, you're going to see the course link highlighted, followed by the other IDs depending on which one we're scrolling on top of. So let's go back over to index.html, and what we're going to do is specify the different IDs for the Bootstrap Scroll Spy. So let's wrap the IDs with a invisible HTML comment. I'm just going to say start home section, which will be the first ID for the home navigation link. And then I'll create a comment saying that this is the end of the home section. That way it's easy to navigate our opening and closing IDs or dividers once we have all of our HTML laid out. So let's finish up adding div ID home. And then if we go back to the finished version, as we know, that's going to span the landing page before we get down to the course section. And to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the home section for the div ID course section down here. I will be doing some copying and pasting throughout the video to save some time. If we don't, the length of the video is really going to start to add up, but you're welcome to type everything out. So you may notice when we get down to the course section that when it transitions into that highlighted navigation item, it's going to account for the space that the fixed navigation takes up at the top of the screen. So what we're going to do to account for that space is we're going to add a class here after div ID course that we're just going to call offset, and we'll style that later in the CSS. So the rest of the IDs and the comments will have that class offset. So we can continue with the copying and pasting, and all we'll change is course to features in this case, and make sure you have a lowercase f in features. And for the following sections, I'm going to use this Sublime Text shortcut. With a Mac, it's Control plus Command plus G, and that's going to select all instances. So if we just add 2 hashtags, for example, here, and select it, then I can just write in the resources text, and that's going to apply it to all 3 instances.
Hey, I just created a professional Wix site.
I'll just change this to lowercase, and then we can do that for the next section as well, which is the clients section with div ID clients. And I'll make this lowercase. And then the last section is going to be contact. So div ID contact. And now we have all of our sections laid out for Bootstrap scroll spies, so we can go ahead and start adding
div ID dengan home. Div ID
our HTML content inside of the IDs, starting with the home section. Alright, so let's get started from the very top of the website with the first inside. Of the IDs, starting with the home section. Alright, so let's get started from the very top of the website with the first part, which is the navigation. So just underneath the div ID home, let's create a new invisible comment saying that this is the start of the navigation, and then I'll just drop down and create a comment saying the end of the navigation. Alright, and then to start off our nav, we'll use the HTML5 nav tag, and we're going to give it a class that's called navbar. And then when we size the website down, as we know, it's going to expand, and then when we size that's called navbar. And then when we size the website down, as we know, it's going to expand at the 768 pixel mark, which is the medium screen mark. So we'll say navbar-expand-md for 768, as we know from the little shortcut here in style.css. And then after we've done that, we're going to set a color for the navigation. Later on, we'll give it its own custom color, but for now, we're just going to say navbar-dark. And that's going to make our navigation links light in color, and then we'll just give it a dark background for now with bg-dark. And then lastly, we'll say fixed-top, because as we know, the navigation bar is going to stay fixed at the top of the screen as we scroll down through the website. So if we save it and refresh, we'll see the first part of our website, which is the blank nav bar at the top. So let's drop down and let's create a site. So if we save it and refresh, we'll see the first part of our website, which is the blank nav bar at the top. So let's drop down and let's create a class for our logo link next. So we'll say a class since it's a link, and then we'll say navbar-brand, which is the standard class for adding a logo in the Bootstrap navbar. And then for the link, I'm just going to leave it blank right now, which will send us back up to the top of the website with a hashtag, or you could do index.html if you're making a multi-page website. And then inside of the link, we'll add the logo image with image source, and that's going to be img/nuno.png. So img for the image folder, and then nuno.png. And then we can close out the anchor tag with the closing A there. Okay, so there we have our logo displaying inside of our anchor tag.
Oke.
With the closing A there. Okay, so there we have our logo displaying inside of our nav bar, and in a little bit we'll resize it. We won't wait until we finish all the HTML content to do some of the CSS. We'll kind of go back and forth between the HTML and CSS throughout the video. Alright, so next let's go ahead and size the website down so we can take a look at the toggle switch. So here we have the navbar toggle button, and what we're going to do is add a button tag here with a class for that we're just going to call navbar-toggler, and then we're going to say type button, and then data toggle, and we want it to collapse the navigation. So it's going to open and collapse, so we'll just say data toggle collapse. And then for the data target, similar to what we used for the Bootstrap scroll spy, we're going to use the ID that we give for the actual navigation. So when we click on the navbar toggler button, it's going to display that ID. So that'll be navbar responsive with the capital R, and then we can close out the button tag. And if we go and refresh, we'll start to see the button a little bit here, but we want to add the hamburger menu that we see displaying inside of the original button here. So we can do that with a single span class with Bootstrap 4, which is navbar-toggler-icon. As you may know, with Bootstrap 3 we had to make a different span for each one of the three hamburger menu rows. Okay, so now we have our collapse button, so we can go ahead and move on to the actual collapsible navigation menu. auto. So let's drop down underneath the button, and we're going to start a new div class, and we're going to say div class collapse. And navbar-collapse, which are Bootstrap classes, obviously, for the navigation. And then we can give it the ID, which is navbar responsive, and we'll take away the hashtag. And then close out the div. And inside of that, we'll start our unordered list, which will contain our list items and navigation links. So we'll say ul class navbar-nav. And then to set the navigation off to the right-hand side, we'll use ml-auto. So this is what I've always used, but I think to center it or move it over to the left, you might use md-auto or mx-auto, but you might want to check me on that. And then let's start our first list item inside of the unordered list, which is li class nav item. And then inside of that, we'll have our link for the home link there first. So that's going to be a class for the link, and then nav-link is the class. And then we'll say href, and I'm just going to leave it blank right now with a hashtag and close out the link. And to save us some time, we can copy and paste this. Alright, so we have 5 navigation links to follow the home link, so I'll just paste this in 5 different times. And then we can fill each one out per section of the page. So with the link, we'll want to link to the actual ID that we set for the different sections of the page, so it will send us to the start of that ID. So we're just going to say hashtag home for the first link, and then for the actual link text, we'll say home. And then if we go and refresh, there we have our first navigation link. So it's not going to light up for us. We're going to set that manually in the CSS. If you wanted it to light up though, if you were making a multi-page site and you weren't using Bootstrap Scroll Spy, you just add the active class to follow the nav link class for the anchor text. Okay, so let's go back and add the rest of the links. So the next one will be for the course section. So we'll want to link to the course ID, starting with the hashtag and then course. And then we can enter the link or the text for the actual link. Then we have the features section, followed by the resources section. and then the clients section, which you can also turn into a testimonial section if you want, with the quotes that are in that section. And then lastly, we have the footer or contact section ID. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at all of our links displaying here in Google Chrome. So if we use the toggle
God damn, keren. Coba aja.
switch, there we have all of our links. And the reason is because with Bootstrap Scroll Spy, if there's no content for it to pick up on, if there's no section ID that you're displaying or scrolling on top of, it's always going to select the last section ID in the Bootstrap Scroll Spy, which, as we know, is the contact section. Okay, so let's move on to the next section of the website, which will be the landing page that we see right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new HTML comment for the fixed background image landing page just underneath the end navigation comment there. So let's say start landing page section, and then let's drop down and create a closing comment saying end landing page section. Alright, so as we know, with the landing page, a lot of the CSS is already set for us in the fix.css file, which makes it so it can display on mobile devices. So we're going to add some classes here from the fix.css file, which is right here. So we have div class landing, and then inside of that we're going to have div class home-wrap, and then we'll have a third div class which is home-inner, and that's where we'll actually set our background image, which we'll do in just a few minutes in the CSS, the first part or entry of our CSS as we work through the video. Okay, so next, before we get to the CSS, let's just lay out the content that's going to display on top of the landing page with our two headings and then the Get Started button underneath it. So staying within the Start Landing Page section comment, let's create a new div class, and we're going to call this div class caption, and everything is going to be centered in here. So we'll use the text-center class, and Bootstrap will take care of centering our text and button. So for the welcome to Nuno text, that's going to be inside of a heading 1. So we'll just say h1 welcome to Nuno. As we know with HTML, we have heading 1 as the largest heading and heading 6 as the smallest. So for the second one, we'll go with sort of a middle size heading with h3, and we're going to say Udemy Bootstrap 4 course. And then underneath that we have our button. So we're going to use a link for the button, and then the class is btn, and then btn-outline-light, and then that's going to be a large button. So btn outline-light, I'll say, is a class that obviously gives a so btn outline, and then that's going to be a large button. So BTN outline dash light, I'll say, is a class that obviously gives a transparent inside the button and then the light outline. And then with Bootstrap buttons, we have extra small up to extra large for the button size, and we're going to go with large with LG. And then we'll add our link. And that's going to send a large with LG. And then we'll add our link. And that's going to send us to the course section of the website. So similar to the navigation link for the course section, we'll just use the hashtag to get us to that div ID using Bootstrap Scroll Spy, and then we'll just add the content inside of the link with the get started text. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh. And by the way, if you want to check out different Bootstrap button colors, just do a simple Google search for Bootstrap buttons and you can get all the components documentation on that. Alright, so now that we have the HTML set for the navigation and the fixed image landing page, let's move over to style.css and lay out the first part of the CSS for the video. So before we actually add any CSS, let's specify our font. So you can do a search for Google Fonts or Lato Google Font, which is the font we're going to use, and then select this font. We'll selection up top, and then we'll want to go over to @import and this for the video and lay out the first part of the CSS for the video. So before we actually add any CSS, let's specify our font. So you can do a search for Google Fonts or Lato Google Font, which is the font we're going to use, and then select this font using the little selection up top, and then we'll want to go over to @import. And actually let's add bold to it before we import it, because we're going to need to add some bold text for the headings. And then we'll just copy the import URL and then paste it at the top of style.css. And then we'll just also want to take the font family from there so we can reference it in just a moment when we specify that for the body. So let's go ahead and add the body CSS now. So that's going to reference the actual body tag for the HTML document. So we'll just say body and then open and close your swirly brackets. And the first thing that we're going to add is something called overflow X hidden. So all the content stays contained within the browser window and it doesn't overflow outside of it. And then we can paste in the font family. And let's go ahead and specify the color of the font that we're going to be using throughout the theme, which is kind of this grayish blue color right here, which is a hex value 505962. And if you want to pick your own color, you can just do a Google search for color hex or hex color and go ahead and add your own hex value for your own text color. Alright, so now that we have our font set and our font color, let's go ahead and drop down to the navigation CSS. So I'm going to create a comment. To separate it, saying navigation. And then the first thing for the navigation that we'll reference will be the class for the navbar. So that's going to be the nav class navbar, which is sort of the main class for the navigation. And we're going to be able to change the background color, among other things, using that class alone. So we're just going to say .navbar, and then text transform uppercase to have all of our links in uppercase characters. And then let's also make it bold to match the original with font weight 700. And then the font size is slightly and we're going to go with large with LG. And then we'll add our link, and that's going to send us to the course section of the website. So similar to the navigation link for the course section, we'll just use the hashtag to get us to that div ID using Bootstrap Scroll Spy, and then we'll just add the content inside of the link with the get started text. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh. And by the way, if you want to check out different Bootstrap button colors, just do a simple Google search for Bootstrap button and then the class. Class is btn and then btn-outline-light, and then that's going to be a large button, 40% transparency with 0.6, it to be half the size of the original picture for the logo. Okay, so let's move down to the actual navigation list items. So if we take a look back at index.html, the class for the unordered list is navbar-nav, and then we'll reference the li for the list item. So we'll say navbar-nav li, and then let's add some additional padding in between the list item. So we'll say 0.7 rem, and that's going to space out our navigation links pretty nicely. Okay, so let's move on to the color navigate 0.7 rem. And that's going to space out our navigation links pretty nicely. Okay, so let's move on to the color of the links. So right now they're kind of a gray shade. So what we'll want to do is let's change the navlink class, which we'll get to referencing the navlink, the navbar nav, and navbar dark. And we're going to change the color to white so it doesn't have that gray shade. So let's say navbar dark and then navbar nav for the list item, and then nav-link for the actual class for the link. And then we're going to change the color to white, so you can use the hex value FFF, or you can just say color white. And then let's also add a little bit of additional padding to the top of the links with 0.8 rem. Alright, so now if we go and refresh, there we have all of our white links, but if we hover over them, they're still going to appear gray rather than the sort of turquoise green shade that we're seeing with the original. So let's copy this selector and paste it in, and then we'll target the active class. So the navigation is lit up according to which section we're in with Bootstrap Scroll Spy, and then we'll also add the color to the hover effect. So we'll say :hover, and then the hex value for that green shade is going to be 1EBBA3. Alright, so let's check it out in Google Chrome here, and if we refresh, there we have our highlighted. Now check it out, BB, the hex value, copy the turquoise green, and then we'll target the active class. So the navigation is lit up according to which section in with Bootstrap Scroll Spy, and then we'll also add the color to the hover effect. So we'll say :hover, navigation link, which also changes when we hover over it. Okay, so let's drop down to the next section, which is the fixed landing page image, as we see here on the finished version. So I'm going to drop down underneath the navigation CSS and create a new comment here, just saying that this is the start of the landing page CSS. Okay, so once we've done that, let's see what we need to reference in index.html. So that's going to be the div class home inner, where we're going to apply the background image. So we'll say .home-inner. If we go back to index.html, we'll want to reference the div class caption. So just underneath home inner, and I'm just going to create some space here, we'll say .caption.
Ya, jadi pada pembelajaran saya pada malam ini saya pelajari beberapa hal-hal penting terkait Bootstrap. Jadi yang pertama itu bagaimana cara membuat hit navigation bar supaya tetap di atas dan bisa chat sehingga pergi menuju ke halaman yang dituju. Kemudian saya sedikit membaca tentang tipografi, kemudian overview dari layout, terus spacing pada utilities dan display pada utilities. Terkhusus pada bagian display headings, saya membaca ternyata di Bootstrap itu ada dua tipe heading. Jadi yang default itu ukurannya agak sedikit kecil, sementara yang khusus seperti display headings ini cukup besar dan fontnya agak beda. Kemudian juga ada responsive font size. Ternyata ukuran font di website menggunakan Bootstrap itu ternyata bisa disesuaikan agar berubah berdasarkan ukuran layar dari pengguna. Ya, mungkin hanya sekian dari saya terkait pembelajaran saya pada malam ini. Saya akan melanjutkan pembelajaran saya lagi